Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. A joint session of Pakistan's parliament has unanimously passed a resolution calling on India to restore the special status of occupied Kashmir. It also called for the release of the illegally detained Kashmiris. Occupied Kashmir has been under a curfew and communication blackout since India revoked its special status last year in August. In Pakistan, the National Command and Control Center says the coronavirus pandemic is under control in the country. In a televised address, NCOC head Asad Umar said schools will be reopened from the 15th of September and tourism from 8th of August. Pakistan has seen a considerable decline in the number of coronavirus cases and deaths in the last 3 days. Currently, the country's death toll stands at 6,035, while the number of infections is over 281,000. Spain has reported nearly 1,800 COVID-19 cases overnight, marking the biggest jump since the national lockdown was lifted in June. Over in Brazil, 1,437 people have died, while more than 57,000 have tested positive for the virus in the last 24 hours. Globally, the virus has claimed over 708,000 lives and infected more than 18.8 million people. Turkey says Libya's warlord Khalifa Haftar does not believe in a political solution to the ongoing crisis in the country and can attack Tripoli anytime. Turkey's Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu said this after talks with Libya's Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj in Tripoli. He said a durable ceasefire would allow Libya's UN-recognized government to spread its control to the east of the capital. The Saudi-led military coalition says it has destroyed an explosive-laden drone launched by the Houthis in the kingdom's direction. Saudi state media quoted the coalition as saying that the drone was launched from Hudaydah Governorate on Yemen's Red Sea coast. Cross-border attacks by Houthi rebels have escalated since May, when a truce prompted by the coronavirus pandemic expired. And detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. A joint session of Pakistan's parliament has unanimously passed a resolution calling on India to restore the special status of occupied Kashmir. Tabled by Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi, the resolution also called for the release of illegally detained Kashmiris. Occupied Kashmir has been under a curfew and communications blackout since India revoked its special status last year in August. Yesterday, the United Nations Security Council held its third meeting in a year to review the latest situation in the occupied territory. Qureshi said human rights violations were discussed in the meeting. He added that the meeting repudiated India's claim of occupied Kashmir being its internal matter. Pakistan says there is no question of initiating backdoor diplomacy with India under the current circumstances. In a weekly press briefing, Foreign Office spokesperson Aisha Farooqi said India's unabated brutalities in occupied Kashmir have ruled out the possibility to engage with New Delhi at this point. Farooqi said Pakistan has once again offered New Delhi to appoint a lawyer for a review petition in the case of India's raw-serving terrorist commander Kulbhushan Yadav. Yadav is facing death penalty in Pakistan after confessing to espionage and terrorism. She said India has not responded to Pakistan's offer yet. The spokesperson said Pakistan has more expectations from OIC than any other international organization regarding the Kashmir dispute. She welcomed the closed-door meeting of the UN Security Council on the Kashmir issue for the third time in a year. The US House Foreign Affairs Committee has expressed concerns to India over its brutal siege of occupied Kashmir. This comes a year after India illegally annexed the valley, stripped it of its UN-recognized status, and imposed an inhumane clampdown. In a letter, the committee refuted New Delhi's claims that conditions in occupied valley have returned to normal. Earlier, a member of the same committee, David Tron, called on India to guarantee the human rights of the Kashmiris in the occupied valley. Tron's statement read lack of internet has prevented Kashmiris from accessing the information on COVID-19 and hampered healthcare services. In Pakistan, the National Command and Control Center says the coronavirus pandemic is under control in the country. In a televised address, NCOC head Asad Umar said schools will be reopened from 15th of September and tourism from 8th of August. Parks, cinemas and museums will be allowed to reopen from the 10th of August. Pakistan has seen considerable decline in the number of coronavirus cases and deaths in the last 3 days. Currently, the country's death toll stands at 6,035, while the number of infections is over 281,000. Spain has reported nearly 1,800 COVID-19 cases overnight, marking the biggest jump since the national lockdown was lifted in June. Over in Brazil, 1,437 people have died, while more than 57,000 have tested positive for the virus in the last 24 hours. Now, globally, the virus has claimed over 708,000 lives and infected more than 18.8 million people.
The coronavirus appears to be setting its sights back to Europe, with the second wave surging in many countries. Spain's COVID-19 cases are on the rise again, with Sweden following other regional countries to impose travel restrictions on Madrid. Germany has issued a travel warning for parts of Belgium following a surge in infections. The Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis too has warned of reimposing restrictions if the spike in cases does not halt. While returning restrictions threaten to extend economic slowdown, COVID-led manufacturing, including masks and protective gear, is booming.
Our biggest export market would be the US. Our products are used in many hospitals in the US. Many hospitals have shown their appreciation through emails thanking us for our products. We are very happy that our efforts in research and development has been a success. Secondly, we also export to Canada, Japan and South Korea.
Brazil reports the second highest number of cases and deaths in the world as authorities struggle to get the outbreak under control. Despite the US leading the world tally of infections and deaths, President Donald Trump is pressing to open schools.
Children handle it very well, and they may get it, but they get it, and it doesn't have much of an impact on them. And if you look at the numbers of in terms of mortality, fatality, the numbers for children under a certain age, meaning young, their immune systems are very, very strong. They're very powerful, and they seem to be able to handle it very well. And that's according to every statistic.
Meanwhile, in Asia, mainland China and South Korea have still not been able to eliminate local transmission of the virus. China has recorded 37, while South Korea reported 43 infections overnight.
In India, COVID-19 continues to wreak havoc as the country recorded over 56,000 cases in a single day, becoming the virus epicenter of South Asia. The country's total number of infections currently stands at over 2 million. Government statistics show the death toll has now climbed to 40,699, with 904 fatalities overnight. Maharashtra is the worst hit state with over 460,000 cases and nearly 16,500 deaths. Tamil Nadu too is reeling from virus with over 273,000 cases and almost 4,500 deaths. While Andhra Pradesh has once again crossed 10,000 daily COVID-19 cases with 77 deaths. These alarming statistics present a monstrous challenge for India's already overwhelmed healthcare system and troubled economy. In India, 8 coronavirus patients have died in a fire in the intensive care ward of a private hospital in the western city of Ahmedabad. The police say the primary cause of the fire appears to be a short circuit. Emergency services say the blaze spread when a medical staffer's personal protective equipment caught fire. Medics said 3 women were among those dead. Rescue officials said around 40 other coronavirus patients at the facility were rescued and shifted to another hospital. Gujarat State Chief Minister Vijay Rupani has ordered a probe into the incident. Sri Lanka has begun counting votes for a parliamentary election, which President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's party is widely expected to win. Close to 70% of eligible Sri Lankans voted in Wednesday's election to the 225-member parliament. Election Commission Chairman Mahinda Deshpadeya said the first results were expected late afternoon, with the final tally coming in around midnight. He said polling ended without any major incidents of violence. The voting rate was lower than the previous parliamentary elections in 2015, where a 77% turnout was recorded. Turkey says Libya's warlord Khalifa Haftar does not believe in a political solution to the ongoing crisis in the country and can attack Tripoli anytime. Turkey's Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu said this after talks with Libya's Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj in Tripoli. He said a durable ceasefire would allow Libya's UN-recognized government to spread its control to the east of the capital. Accompanied by his Maltese counterpart, Evadis Bartolos, Çavuşoğlu said diplomatic visits between Turkey, Libya and Malta will continue. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said a UN-brokered ceasefire in Libya holds the key for peace in the region. Libya has been plagued by a political crisis since the ouster of longtime ruler Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. The Saudi-led military coalition says it destroyed an explosive-laden drone launched by the Houthis in the kingdom's direction. Saudi state media quoted the coalition as saying that the drone had been launched from Hodeidah Governorate on Yemen's Red Sea coast. Cross-border attacks by Yemeni rebels have escalated since May, when a truce prompted by the coronavirus pandemic expired. In late June, missiles reached the Saudi capital Riyadh, and the coalition retaliated with airstrikes. In 2015, the Arab coalition intervened in Yemen after the Houthis ousted the internationally recognized government from Sana'a. The US says it will table a resolution in the UN Security Council next week to extend the arms embargo on Iran. Speaking to reporters, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Washington will ensure that the ban is extended. Pompeo said the proposal to extend the ban on Iran is eminently reasonable. He said the Security Council will make a mockery of its mission if it allows Tehran to buy and sell weapons openly. The arms ban is currently set to end on October the 18th under Iran's 2015 nuclear deal with the world powers. The US drafted resolution needs at least 9 votes in favor to force Russia and China to use their vetoes. If it is unsuccessful, the US has threatened to reimpose all UN sanctions on Iran under a process agreed in 2015 deal. China has called to resume dialogue over the South China Sea, saying the water should not become a wrestling ground for international politics. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi says Beijing sees the energy-rich waters as a shared home for countries in the region. Wang said the US should stop its provocative actions and blatant interference in the territorial disputes in the sea. He said Washington is trying to drive a wedge between China and ASEAN nations to serve its domestic politics and geopolitical agenda. Wang urged regional countries to remain vigilant and preserve hard-won peace.
Facts have proved that settling disputes through dialogue is the right way that best serves the interests of regional countries, and countries in the region have a shared responsibility to keep the South China Sea peaceful and stable. Under the current situation, China proposes that we remove all disturbances to restart as soon as possible the Code of Conduct consultation and agree as early as possible on a set of rules for maintaining long-term peace and stability in the region.
The US says it wants to remove untrusted Chinese tech apps from American app stores, alleging significant threats to data security. In a media briefing, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the apps contribute to Beijing's content censorship and surveillance apparatus. Pompeo said federal agencies will collaborate to limit the ability of Chinese cloud service providers to collect, store and process data. He said it was crucial to restrict the cloud-based systems run by Chinese firms Alibaba, Baidu, China Mobile, China Telecom and Tencent. The top US diplomat said the government was doing its utmost to protect personal and intellectual property, including critical vaccine research. Pompeo called upon like-minded nations to collaborate and join a clean global network to protect sensitive information.
We're working to ensure that the CCP can't compromise information carried by the undersea cables that connect our country and others to the global internet. Huawei Marine significantly underbids other companies on multiple procurements to connect Asia, the Pacific, Africa, and Europe using Chinese state-backed undersea technology. We can't allow that to continue. We call on all freedom-loving nations and companies to join the clean network.
Palestine has called on the international community to sanction Israel over its rights violations in the Palestinian territories. In a statement, the Foreign Ministry said Palestine condemns the Israeli expansion and colonial ambitions in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. The ministry said Israel has been confiscating Palestinian lands and demolishing homes. Earlier in the day, the Israeli authorities demolished 3 more Palestinian homes in East Jerusalem. Meanwhile, a UN report said Israel had demolished 30 constructions in the West Bank and East Jerusalem during the past 2 weeks. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs said the demolitions led to the displacement of 25 people. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. French President Emmanuel Macron says Lebanon will continue to face political and economic crisis unless it enacted reforms. Macron made the remarks while speaking to reporters after reaching Beirut. The French president is the first foreign leader to visit Lebanon after Beirut's explosion that killed 137 people and injured more than 5,000. He was greeted on the airport by the Lebanese counterpart Michel Aoun. Macron said his visit is a gesture of hope for the Lebanese in tough times. He said France is coordinating international relief efforts for the crisis-hit country. Many European and Arab countries have dispatched medical aid, field hospitals, rescue experts, and tracking dogs to Lebanon. Japan is marking 75 years since the world's first atomic bomb eviscerated Hiroshima as attendees prayed for victims in scaled-back ceremonies. Hiroshima Mayor Kazumi Matsui has urged the world to unite and warned against the nationalism that led to the Second World War. 75 years on, the gaping wounds are yet to heal, and the hopes of a world free of nuclear weapons remain a distant dream.
On that fateful morning of the 6th of August 1945, the US dropped the nuclear bomb nicknamed Little Boy on the city. Around 140,000 people were instantly killed, while several perished in the following months due to radiation sickness, fatal burns, and other injuries. Merely 3 days after the Hiroshima attack, the US dropped another atomic bomb on Nagasaki in southern Japan, killing another 74,000 people. 6 days later, Japan surrendered, ending World War II. The annual event is held to commemorate the unprecedented nuclear aggression while underscoring the dwindling number of survivors, known as Hibakusha. Most of the Hibakusha have kept alive the memory of bombings and dedicated their lives to campaign for a ban on nuclear weapons. Terumi Tanaka, who was a 13-year-old student at the time, says their activism has taken on an increasing level of urgency as they age.
I do think the world is slowly moving to a world without nuclear weapons, but when I compare the speed of this movement to the speed of us aging and dying, I think the pace of us dying is faster. After all the atomic bomb survivors are gone, I'm worried if people will be able to really understand what we have experienced.
The US has never apologized, while some historians argue the bombing saved more lives by ending the war and stopping a land invasion. But decades later, the Japanese widely consider the attacks as war crimes for indiscriminately targeting civilians.
In Somalia, 8 soldiers have been killed and several wounded in an attack on a military base in southwestern Bay province. A government spokesperson says the terrorists attacked a National Army base in Dianune. The spokesman said that an army commander was among those killed in the attack. Al-Shabaab claimed the responsibility for the attack via the internet. He added that after the attack, a military vehicle carrying reinforcements was targeted in a roadside blast, wounding several soldiers. A military official said that more than 6 Al-Shabaab fighters were also killed in fierce fighting with the Somali army. The World Health Organization says at least 74 Ebola virus cases have been recorded in the latest outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo. In a tweet, the health agency said so far there are 32 deaths and 28 recoveries from the 11th Ebola virus outbreak in Babandaka, Equator province. For several months, the country has been battling with several diseases including cholera, Ebola and measles. Last month, the WHO's office in DRC said that nearly 13,000 people have been vaccinated since the start of the 11th Ebola outbreak in early June. Moving on to Turkey, where thousands of women have taken to the streets of several cities to protest against gender-based violence. They demand the country remain a signatory to a 2011 Council of Europe Accord against such attacks. The protest was spurred by an online campaign in the wake of the brutal killing of a female student in the southwestern province of Mogila. President Tayyip Erdogan's ruling AK party officials say they are considering opting out of the pact designed for stronger women's rights. The remarks have alarmed campaigners who see the Istanbul Convention as key to combating a rising domestic violence. Many conservatives in Turkey say the pact is counterproductive as it encourages violence by undermining family structures. The death toll from the tropical storm Isaias has risen to 8 as it continues to ravage U.S. Atlantic coast with rain and fierce winds. Officials said one woman died in Pennsylvania when her vehicle was overtaken by the water and swept downstream. 2 people were killed by falling trees in Connecticut and Delaware, while a woman was found dead inside a New Hampshire house. Electric supply companies said the storm left over 2.8 million homes and businesses without power from New York to North Carolina. The tornado suspended regional rail service in Philadelphia and New Jersey, and the Interstate 676 highway was also closed. U.S. National Hurricane Center said the maximum sustained winds of 105 kilometers per hour went down to 64 kilometers per hour. Torrential rains and flash floods have battered northwest China, collapsing roads and exploding a natural gas pipeline in the Shaanxi province. Local government says the rescuers have transported nearly 500 people to safety from the disaster-hit areas. Authorities say the stormy weather will continue to batter the area and call for disaster prevention and flood cleanup. Officials said the pipeline exploded after a nearby road collapsed in Yulin city. Emergency services evacuated over 100 local residents after the explosion.
It happened around 1:40 this morning when we were sleeping. After we were woken up by the loud blast, which was so loud, I went out to check out what happened. When I stepped out of my home, I realized it was a blast from a natural gas pipeline. I saw rocks on the road had exploded to that wall.
In South Korea, a rescue worker has been killed and 5 others are missing when their boats were swept over a dam by surging floodwaters near Chuncheon city. Parts of South Korea have seen 44 consecutive days of rain, the longest monsoon since 2013. This takes the death toll in recent days to 17, with 16 others missing and more than 1,600 people displaced. In the capital Seoul, the Han River overflowed after authorities were forced to open floodgates on upstream dams. More than 5,000 houses and facilities were reported flooded or damaged in the country. In a visit to one of the hardest hit areas, President Moon Jae-in raised concerns about North Korea releasing excess water without notification. A massive fire broke out in more than 20 warehouses of wholesale markets in Najaf, Iraq. Iraqi officials say firefighters are working on site to put out the blaze. Meanwhile, a large inferno broke out at a market in Ajman. Police say the fire has been brought under control. Fortunately, both fires did not cause any casualties. It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. The Pakistan Stock Exchange has hit a 21-week high with the benchmark KSE 100 index closing at 40,422 points. The index improved by 540 points, recording positive performance not seen since February. The index has been rising after reaching its lowest level in March when the WHO declared a COVID-19 pandemic. Pakistan Stock Exchange director says the gain is due to a decrease in the interest rate and the revival of the economic activities. Experts say another major reason for the rising performance of the index can be the construction sector or the packages announced by the government for that. US billionaire Dan Friedkin has agreed to a deal worth over $700 million to purchase the Italian football club AS Roma. In a statement, Roma said the formal contracts with the Texas-based Friedkin Group were signed on Wednesday. Roma's president, James Pallotta, said the transaction with the group will be completed by the end of the month. In a statement, Friedkin said he was looking forward to become part of Roma family. It is Friedkin Group's first major foray into the sporting world, as it usually invests in automotive, hospitality and entertainment sectors. Under Pallotta, the club hired 8 different coaches, finished runners-up thrice, but never really challenged Juventus's dominance. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.